All was quiet on the Zanzibar Channel when a horrible maritime accident happened on September 10th, 2011. A large passenger boat, the MV Spice Islander 1, carrying more than 2,000 people, went down near Zanzibar, an island off the coast of Tanzania. The boat was traveling between two islands, Unguja and Pemba, when it flipped over into the Indian Ocean. At first, reports said that around 200 people had died, but a few months later, in January of 2012, the Tanzanian government released information stating that the actual number of people who died was much higher, over 1,500. It would end up increasing by over 500 fatalities. This is that story. This ship, stretching nearly 200 feet long and almost 38 feet wide, was a workhorse of the seas. Built in 1967 and christened Mariana, its early travels remain a mystery. It eventually found a home in Greece, changing hands a few times and even getting a new name, Apostolos P. One thing's for sure, and that's the Spice Islanders logbook definitely included the names of many incredible islands it likely visited, carrying people between Piraeus and Aegina. In 2005, the ship switched companies again, and by 2007, it embarked on a new adventure. It was sold to someone in Zanzibar, Tanzania, and given a fresh start as Spice Islander 1. But its journey wasn't always smooth sailing. In 2007, near Somalia, the vessel ran into trouble with bad fuel, leaving its engine sputtering. Luckily, a helping hand came from the USS Stout, a mighty ship patrolling the area. With some fresh fuel, food, and water from the kind crew of the USS Stout, and maybe even the USS James E. Williams, Spice Islander 1 was back on track, chugging towards its new home in Tanzania. Unfortunately, help was not on the way henceforth. Shortly after 11 p.m. on September 9, 2011, the Spice Islander 1 ferry set sail from Unguja, Zanzibar's main island, with Pemba Island to the north as its destination. Packed with many more people than it was designed to safely carry, the vessel was supposed to hold just 45 crew and 645 passengers. Disaster struck just before 1 a.m. While traveling between the islands in an area known for powerful currents and deep waters, the Spice Islander 1 began to sink. Survivors described the terrifying scene as the ferry started to list and take on water. Panic erupted as passengers realized the danger. One survivor described it as if there was something strange about how the boat was moving, almost like it was drunk. The same survivor clung to a piece of floating debris with 3 others to survive. They jumped to the back of the ship, and within minutes, it just rolled right over. This specific individual wasn't alone in remembering the large number of children on board. Another survivor described a rush of water flooding the main area of the ferry, which then caused the engines to die. With no power, many people had no choice but to jump into the dark water. It's believed that the ferry tipped over completely, officially termed as capsized, because it lost engine power. On top of the passengers, the ferry was also carrying cargo, including rice, foodstuffs that were undoubtedly vital to nearby communities. The night sea, a pitch-black endeavor of pure terror, swallowed those who weren't lucky enough to find something to stay afloat with. Clinging to whatever debris they could in the dark ocean, survivors drifted for hours. The strong currents eventually pushed them back towards Zanzibar, where the white sand beaches offered a glimmer of hope. By morning, news of the disaster had reached those very shores, drawing thousands of worried people, desperate for any sign of their loved ones. One man, his voice hoarse with grief, kept calling out the names of his missing family, his sisters, his wife, his grandchildren, 25 names in all. As the sun climbed higher, a grim task unfolded. Police officers waded through the crystal clear water, carrying bodies back to shore. Wrapped in colorful fabrics and blankets, the corpses were laid on stretchers. The smallest bundles, children lost in the tragedy, were carried gently in the officer's arms. Tourists on the island joined the rescue efforts, while local charities offered survivors blankets and warm tea. A young mother, only 27, recounted the horrific ordeal that stole her children and sister. She revealed that before the vessel even left the original dock, some people jumped ship when they saw it tilting. But when the mother and her family attempted to do the same, the crew took away the stairs and set sail for Pemba anyway. They were enjoying their first-class cabin when strong currents started rocking the boat. Panic erupted as screams filled the air. The mother noted that her sister grabbed the young daughter and ran to the deck, while she stayed with her son as the ship started swerving violently. A wave crashed over them, ripping her son from her arms. For 7 long hours, she clung to a single life jacket with other survivors until they were finally rescued. Unfortunately, even though she found herself still alive on that beach, she didn't know the fate of her son. Despite rumors of her son surviving, all she had was the agonizing uncertainty. This brutal experience was not exclusive to her either. Psychological torment was everywhere that fateful morning. At the closest hospital to the incident, doctors treated survivors who were dehydrated and bruised from being tossed around in the packed ferry before it went down. One young survivor, an 11-year-old girl, was too weak to even talk. Lying in bed with an IV drip, she showed signs of deep emotional shock and internal injuries. Another survivor echoed the concerns of the aforementioned 27-year-old mother regarding the ferry's safety. He told reporters the boat was crammed with people and cargo. Sadly, some of his own family members were still missing at the time of his recovery. He left the hospital to join the thousands gathered at the Maisara grounds, where the heartbreaking task of searching for loved ones awaited. Rows upon rows of men, women, and children, shrouded in black blankets, lay before him. The only clues to their identity were numbered labels and nearby clothing, a desperate paper-thin hope for grieving families. Anger simmered throughout Zanzibar. Many people couldn't understand how such an overloaded boat was ever allowed to leave port in the first place. Residents of Stone Town had a grim nickname for the vessel, a disaster waiting to happen. Another survivor again mentioned passengers refusing to board the overcrowded ferry back at the departing port. Yet another red flag, ignored before the tragic journey even began. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the government also clamped down on information. Reporters were discouraged from covering the story, and details were kept under wraps. Officials tried to calm the public with statements like, "The government is doing everything they can," from Mohammed Abu Mohammed, a government minister. Early reports guessed around 800 people were on board when the ferry sank. By September 12th, over 240 bodies were recovered. But in October, a shocking truth emerged. The government admitted the ferry was actually carrying a staggering 3,600 passengers, with over 2,700 still missing. Months later, an investigation brought those numbers down to a revised estimate of 2,500 passengers. Tragically, even with the adjusted numbers, the human cost remained immense. 203 confirmed dead and nearly 1,400 missing. Zanzibar's government, officially called the Revolutionary Government, jumped into action after the disaster. They opened a support center for those impacted by the tragedy and called on extra help from local volunteers to bolster rescue efforts. Zanzibar even reached out to other African countries for additional assistance. Meanwhile, ferries worked tirelessly to bring survivors back to Stone Town, Zanzibar's main port. After a week of recovery efforts, search and rescue squads had to call it quits. Even with the assistance of divers from the South African Navy, the bodies still stuck within the overturned ferry would have to wait to be retrieved. There simply weren't enough resources to clear it in a timely manner. The country declared a 3-day mourning period for the victims on September 11th. To prevent future tragedies, an investigation into the sinking was launched. Zanzibar's Minister of State vowed strong action. Those responsible will face serious consequences according to our laws, he declared. Around the same time search and rescue efforts ceased, multiple arrests were made in confirmation of the minister's promise. Local news outlets reported that 4 individuals were facing charges related to the tragedy, less than a week after the deadly excursion occurred. Topping the list was the missing captain, 58-year-old Syed Abdallah Kinyanite. Authorities haven't confirmed if he drowned in the early morning incident of September 10th, but he was charged in absentia at the Zanzibar High Court. The other accused include 47-year-old Yusuf Yusa, co-owner of the ferry, 30-year-old Abdullah Muhammad Ali, the first officer on duty that night, and 27-year-old Salima, a Port Authority employee responsible for passenger inspection. Zanzibar's public prosecutor alleges negligence on their part, according to an article published in the Tanzania Citizen newspaper. He claims their actions directly caused the ferry to become overloaded with passengers and cargo, just like everyone who survived remembered, leading to the deaths of 203 people. This case marks a potential step towards justice for the victims and their families. However, if that wasn't bad enough, an extremely similar situation struck the folks of Zanzibar once again. Just a few months after the horrific Spice Islander 1 tragedy, another ferry accident struck Tanzania in July 2012. This time, the ferry MV Skagit was offering transport between Dar es Salaam and Unguja Island. The trip started normally with over 250 people on board, but calamity reared its ugly head near Chum Island as the vessel encountered rough seas. The ferry, certified for a maximum of 250 passengers, was reportedly carrying 290, which may have contributed to the sinking. Although at least 146 people were rescued, as many as 150 remained missing after a full day of search efforts. Blaming factors emerged. Some reports pointed to strong winds and overloading, while the Zanzibar government argued the ferry ventured too far during a storm. Adding to the controversy, Tanzania's weather officials revealed warnings had been issued against making the crossing due to the rough seas. In the aftermath of the MV Skagit sinking, Zanzibar finally took steps to improve safety. The sister ship, the MV Kalama, also a potential hazard, was banned from operation. This move was followed by a wider safety inspection, leading to the removal of 4 ferries from Zanzibar's registry. Hopefully, with these newfound precautions, we can avoid a repeat of the Spice Islander tragedy and all of the other Tanzanian maritime mishaps that have plagued the surrounding seas.